Good evening, everyone. I am CA Hemant Kumar Moore, moderator of today's webinar. Before starting today's session, I would like to appraise all our members about the 21st World Congress of Accountants, which is going to be held for the first time in India from 18th November 2022 to 21st November 2022. To know more about this, I would request our technical team to play a short informational video. Please say this and register yourself for the same.
Geographically, the seventh largest country in the world, one of the oldest civilization, world's sixth largest economy, a global hub for innovation with one of the largest startup ecosystem. India, city of Mumbai on the western coast of Arabian Sea, among the most advanced and modern metropolises in the world, and the financial capital of India, gears up to host the most prestigious accountancy event of the world, 21st World Congress of Accountants from 18th to 21st November 2022, an event held every 4 years. The Olympic of Accountancy Profession. India hosts the event for the first time in 118 years since the WCOA came into being in 1904. Around 10,000 delegates expected to join virtually. More than 6,000 delegates from over 135 countries would congregate to exchange views at the world's most advanced Geo World Convention Center. The theme, Building Trust, Enabling Sustainability, will inspire the future of accountancy profession to create sustainable economies for the future.
The ICAI is honored to be the host for this mega event, which will bring together the world's largest conglomeration of professional accountants, regulators, leaders, and visionaries to advance the cause of the global accountancy profession. Now, with the ease of travel restrictions across the world and the situation returning to normal, we are working towards creating a never before and a unique experience for all our delegates. The year 2022 marks the 75th year of India's independence, and the Government of India is celebrating the year in a big way to showcase the glorious history of India. World Congress of Accountants 2022 would also be celebrated as a mega event to showcase the important role that the accountancy profession has been playing in the economic and social development of the country.
A never before witnessed unique experience of learning future trends, emerging avenues, enhancing skill sets, networking, and to explore the incredible India awaits you.
We at ICAI are pleased to host you here in Mumbai, the financial capital of India, for the 21st World Congress of Accountants with the theme Building Trust, Enabling Sustainability from November 18 to 21, 2022, and give you a professionally enriching and personally rejuvenating experience. We are hopeful that the conference shall be stimulating and productive, and your stay in India will be a memorable experience. Once again, we invite you for this enthralling convergence in India, the land of multicultural, historical, and spiritual inheritance since centuries.
Insights from the stalwarts of the profession, international and national standard setters, regulators, and trendsetters will constitute the panel of speakers at WCOA 2022. Let your dream get bigger. Come, be a part of this mega celebration. For registration and sponsorship opportunities, contact. Organized by Institute of Chartered Accountants of India under the aegis of IFAC.
We are delighted to welcome you all to the webinar being organized by the Committee on Economic, Commercial Laws and Economic Advisory of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. It is my pleasure to be a moderator for this session on the webinar on Human Resource Management and Labor Laws. Before we start today's seminar, just a brief line about our committee which is organizing this seminar. The committee, in line with one of the Institute's objectives, partners in nation building, and with the vision to contribute to the economic development of India, aims to undertake such activities to technically equip and broaden the scope of expertise of the members to enable them to derive advantages in the rapidly changing scenario and to enable the members to render various business advisory and support services. This, as we all know, this is a 4-day event. Yesterday, we had a lovely session by our guest speaker. That was on setting up of a robust human resource department. Today, the topic will be payroll processing. Each day will be a 2-hour session. Our eminent speaker will talk about all the emerging areas of professional interest. It is my proud privilege to introduce today's speaker, a very distinguished and learned speaker on the topic, Sri Kevin Dias. He is professionally qualified with an MBA in Human Resource and a degree in law, both from Mumbai University. His rich and diversified experience in the field of human resources spans over 25 years across various industries such as manufacturing, retail, engineering, and ITES. He has experience in growing and managing complex large workforce of more than 150,000 employees. His expertise in people strategy, acquisition, development and management, HR policies, reward and benefit, HR digitization, governance, integration, compliance, employee relations, global mobility, employee relations, inclusion and diversity, employee experience, wellness and HR transformation has enabled organizations be very competitive. With these words, I welcome the guest speaker for today's webinar, Sri Kevin Dias. Kevin, sir, please start the session.
Thank you so much, Hemant, for your wonderful words and so kind of you. And I also thank the Committee of Economic, Commercial Laws and Economic Advisory for having me over these 4 days. I enjoyed yesterday talking to you about the HR department and sharing my perspective on what are the different forms of HR delivery. Today, I am humbled to be with all of you because one of the expertise and the knowledge each one of you chartered accountants carry, and a lot of respect for each one of you in what you do. And payroll as a topic is not unfamiliar to each one of you. So I'll try to do my best to give you my perspective and also share with you some practical elements around payroll along with the tech that we have. So that gives you a kind of holistic approach to this whole thing. And so in these next 1.5 hours or a little more than that, I will try to do my best to walk you through payroll. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Right. So today's topic being payroll and payroll processing. Now, I don't need to walk you through what is payroll. I think each one of us, I know some of you have your own practice, and so therefore you all have employees or people alongside with you, who are working alongside with you. And some of you are in organizations, and so payroll is something that is not that is devoid or is something that you do not know. So payroll primarily is about calculating and paying the remuneration or salary for each employee. Now the employee categories are different. You have those who are full-time employees. You have now those who are also the fixed term contracts. You have those who are consultants, those who have retired and also now working in the organization as consultant. And of course, as a principal employer, you would also need to look at the contractors for whom wages and salaries are being paid. Yes, in the new regime of the labor codes, the whole element around the principal employer has been given a lot more weightage. And so no longer now it is about the contractor and what the contractor needs to pay. It is the principal employer who needs to be very aware and ensure that the payroll and the salaries are being paid as per the laws that have been prevailing in the country. So having said that, I'm going to break payroll processing into 3 or 4 steps, okay, to help you understand that. And I'm going to start with the salary structure and look at how we can progress from there to the data, to look at how the actual thing, payroll processing happens. I will also end that particular piece with audit, because as CAs, I'm sure each one of us know that audit and reconciliation is a very important element in the whole process. And finally, walk you through one example of a technology to give you an idea how technology can help you in doing payroll processing, whether you are consulting organizations or you're working inside an organization. So this is what the whole presentation is going to be all about. Okay, so primarily, let's start with the structure. So payroll primarily is about net salary, right? When a person joins an organization, and I will show you one salary structure just to highlight what I'm trying to talk about. So when a person joins an organization, you get an appointment letter. Yesterday, we discussed in detail about appointment letter. So once you get that, there you have your gross per month, and you have a concept known as CTC, cost to the company. But salary is primarily the net salary in hand after all deductions. And so you have deductions made from your statutory elements of labor, and at the end also your income tax. So I'm not going to travel into the area of income tax because each one of you are super experts in that area, and I would love to learn some of those elements from you. So net salary, gross salary, from where the net salary is derived is your basic plus HRA, other allowances, reimbursements, areas, bonuses, and any overtime, and any of those inputs that go into the pay of an individual. So these are various things that we will talk about today. And finally, you have the deductions, right? There are permissible deductions, and some of those are from the law, and some of those are also from disciplinary action. So from the law side, you have your professional tax, your provident fund, your ESIC, etc., insurance, medical, your labor welfare. Okay, and at the same time, you have also those that, for example, if somebody has taken a loan from the organization, and so those deductions. But from a disciplinary standpoint, the law also allows for certain deductions by virtue of fines that can happen. So it is not that an employer can just feel free to deduct whatever they want from an employee's salary. There are also certain guiding principles that govern what can come under fines and deductions. So that's understanding basic formula. Now, payroll structures or other salary structures are primarily derived from looking at one, the grade in the organization. So the junior, the senior, the mid-level, and so on and so forth. The skill set. So how are salaries derived in an organization? Let me help you with that. So a salary is derived when first you look at the level, right? So each organization has grades, and those grades are a hierarchy, right? And the hierarchy is primarily about skill versus experience versus responsibility versus complexity. So that's how you create a hierarchy. Now, so therefore salary also and the bands of salary are given differentials by virtue of your grade, your skill. Now, if you're an individual performer versus you are a supervisor that needs to lead a team, the responsibility levels that you carry. So you are affecting a 100 crore business within the organization or a 20 crore business within an organization, and so on and so forth. And finally, it is also about working conditions, right? So is it remote? Is it a lot of traveling? Is it sitting in an office? Is it in A class, B class city? So all of these factors get into deriving the bands for a salary. Now, why do you create bands? The bands are created because at the end of the day, employment cost is a very significant value on the balance sheet. And anything that happens in that particular area has a direct impact on the way the net profit is. So therefore, it is very sensitive as a topic, and also therefore needs a lot of focus to ensure that it is done correctly. So market benchmarks are some things that organizations resort to ensure that either they are paying. So primarily the benchmark golden rule or the thumb rule is pay between the 50th to the 65th percentile of the market for your general roles. So by that virtue, you are able to attract and you're also able to retain. But for your critical resources and for those roles that are very critical to the organization, there the organizations go all the way up to the 85th or 75th to the 85th percentile. So this is how you look at a strategy when you are benchmarking and doing your salaries. Okay. So the other one that at the lower end is the minimum wages. And now since we're going to have a national minimum wage, and also you'll have the state. So the minimum wage is one thing that is very important to comply with. And finally, as you know, and more so that you know, is that there are a lot of things that you can do with a salary structure to help employees from a tax point of view. So one of the best salary structures allow a certain degree of flexibility given a framework for employees to be better at saving tax, or it prompts an employee to put money aside, whether it is PPF or anything else, for them to not only have a savings at the end of their working life, but also from a tax point of view. So this is some of the things that I think are important to discuss before we get into the whole element of payroll processing. So before I get there, let me talk to you about a salary structure. So I'm going to bring out the salary structure. Just give me a second. Okay. So now if you can see my screen, we spoke about this yesterday. So yesterday we saw this employment contract. Okay, and this was the salary structure that we had yesterday, but we did not discuss too much of it because today we were going to discuss it any which way. Now, primarily, when I gave you the strategy of how you derive a salary structure as per the grades and bands, in a salary structure, you have your fixed component, you have your statutories, and then you have your variable component. Now, the variable component is not in this particular example, but these are the three major components that go into any of your salary structures. So for you, if you're deriving a salary structure, keep the concept of fixed, you have your statutory, and then you have variables. Now, primarily, a lot of organizations have started looking at many allowances. So you have your basic, primarily that is there, your HRA, so 50% here in tier 1, 40% tier 2, and then you have your special allowance. And then a lot of organizations went with washing allowance, car allowance, and so on and so forth, and kept increasing that list. But the trend or the good practice that is there is to have a very simple salary structure. Okay, and that is most important. So a lot of organizations have resorted to collapsing these number of allowances, okay, and making those allowances more relevant. Now, what they've done, if you see this whole piece called special allowance, now in that area of special allowance, a lot of organizations, and I would also recommend so, is that you have a policy that defines what all allowances can be there as part of special allowance. Now, special allowance, just to make it clear, these are the three components that get paid every month irrespective. But when we put a policy in place saying that what are the different allowances that comprise a special allowance, it is more from the tax saving point of view. So you could have LTA, you could have a washing allowance, you could have a driver's salary, you can have various things that you know more better in terms of the income tax rules, and that can form part of the special allowance. Now, there's one thing that you need to be careful is that when you're doing something like that, you have to ensure that no allowance is uniformly and commonly used across the board. So that does not come in the purview of the PF. So therefore, for certain sets of people, you call it special allowance, you change the nomenclature for certain sets of people, you put in a different structure for the junior guy. Now, so if the guy is getting a uniform, then yes, please by all means put a washing allowance. So it has to be relevant, and it also is not uniformly and commonly used across the board. The second element is your statutories. Now, statutories, as you rightly know, is your provident fund, your labor welfare, your P-tax, your ESIC if they are less than 21,000, and gratuity and things like that. So this is the notional value of gratuity. And so some companies have included that in the cost to the company, while some companies have excluded that and put it over and above. And those are more progressive. Even the statutory bonus calculated at 8.33 or at 21, depending on what the profit of the organization is also included when you are deriving the salary. Now, that is because the concept of CTC came in, cost to the company. So the concept of cost to company is to know that what is it that I am now going to pay Kevin Dias on a monthly and an annual basis. So that's the reason why this. Now, when it comes to a compensation structure, it is important for you to also look at the variable. Now, what do you mean by variable? So there are performance bonuses, there are retention bonuses, there are long-term bonuses, there are ESOPs, which is your notional value of shares, and shares by itself if it's a listed company. So you have all those forming part of what we call the variable components. Now, typically in any organization at the junior level, that is at your entry level and 1 or 2 years of experience, 100% is in fixed salary primarily, unless he's a sales guy. That's a separate structure altogether. As you move to the mid-level, the general notion is 90-10, 90 fixed, 10 variable. Little more senior, it is 80-20. As they go to the leadership level, it is 70-30. And that 70-30 can even become 60-40. Now, the reason why I said that it is done in that fashion is because of two reasons. One, maturity of the organization to really understand the people need to vibe with that this is a kind of salary structure. Otherwise, some people look at that and say, ye to milne wala hai nahi, so forget about that damn variable pay. But that is not the notion that you would like to carry in the organization. A good variable pay is where at least 65% of the population actually earn it in whatever fashion, because otherwise people will give up and nobody will want to have earned that variable pay, and that is detrimental to the company, because it is much better to have people performing consistently at 85% than to have a variable performance ranging from 50 to 100. So therefore it is good that some people actually earn. So performance bonus broken up like this: 100% at junior, 90-10, 80-20, 70-30. The second reason why people do this is because the higher you are in the organization, the more you are equipped to effect the organization's overall goals. As junior you can only effect your own goals and your own delivery. But as you progress higher in the organization, you have the power, the responsibility, and the ability to impact the organization goals. Okay, so therefore 30%, 20% being part of your salary structure. Organizations have very effectively also used long-term bonuses. Now, long-term bonuses are bonuses that get paid in spans of 6 months, 3 months, 9 months to a year. Now, they are done primarily for two reasons. One, there is also an element of calibration to the market. And the second is also about retention. Now, these periods of 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, 2 years is actually not random. It is done keeping a very strategic perspective. Now, if you know, and data speaks volumes, so a lot of HR people need to focus on data. If they realize that certain categories of people attract in 24 months or 36 months for an increase in package that is, say, 20% or 30%. If you place the long-term bonus in between that period, you're taking away the excitement to move and jump in a new job, because suddenly that increase that they're getting in the market isn't too much compared to what they would have earned if they had also got that long-term bonus. So you see, it is very strategically placed. The value also is very strategically decided. So it is not random. So the organizations and HR teams spend time putting these things in place to ensure that for certain roles in the organization, where it is a person not being there is detrimental to the company, these measures are used. Of course, ESOPs is another element that has been very strongly used by organizations, especially the whole startup culture, etc., including those established organizations, to retain and create wealth for people. So at a certain level and above, it's not so much about now how much money I make, it's also about the wealth that I'm creating for me and my family. So this is all about salary structure. I thought I spent some time explaining to you how a salary structure comes into play. We can question and debate this in the question and answers at the end of this presentation. So I'm going back to my presentation now. Great. So this is where we were. 3 stages, right? The first stage, pre-payroll. The second is the actual payroll. And the third is post. Now let us understand what all happens in all this processing. And there are organizations that use different cutoffs. So some people use 15th as the cutoff of the month, 20th at the cutoff of the month. And then, but one thing that I've not been able to understand so much is that, especially the hullabaloo that happens, or the whole focus is payroll processing time. You see that if you have your payroll process done in a correct manner, with inputs coming in a correct manner, then payroll processing is not cumbersome. So having managed very large workforces, payroll processing can be done with a 99.5% accuracy, okay, if your processes are right. And I'm going to stress on that. So while each one of you are working in your own organizations or setting up this for organizations you consult, focus on the process, focus on the mechanism of checks and balances, focus on the process of input, because once those things are correct, the output has to also be correct. So I think, and let's talk about this as we move through this presentation. So this, and the last stage is all about reporting. It's all about audit. It's all about accounting and statutory compliance. One second. Right. So stage 1. Now, gathering of data. Now, this is one of the key elements in the whole process. And I will show you through technology how this can become a very smooth and easy process. Now, once a person joins, let's start from there. You got the offer letter, and that offer letter has a salary structure. And that salary structure is based on a standard that the organization has created for those grades and levels. So long as there's no deviation in that, things are smooth. Now, once that happens, that has to get entered into the system or in the Excel, whichever you're using. I would recommend that each one of you use a payroll system, because it is very authentic and makes life much easier and also scalable. So if it is there on your system, that's the first input that needs to happen. Then comes the element of declaration, which is where the employee declares what tax saving measures that they're going to provide for you to calculate a certain amount of tax that you will deduct month on month. So that's the first element that you will get into when you are doing your payroll processing. And then once that happens in the first month, so typically the cutoff, so if the person joined after the cutoff, so 20th of the month, then generally the salary is processed along with the next. If it is before the cutoff, then salary is processed in that same month. So the cutoffs could be anywhere between 15th to the 21st of the month, depending on the size of the workforce and the kind of attrition that your organization sees. So typically in a BPO world and certain organizations where attrition levels are very high, you also are very careful of ensuring that your cutoffs and towards the end, how you process the payroll and stop the salary for those who have absconded, we'll talk about that later, is all part of this whole process of payroll. So that gathering data. So what all data do we gather and how do we validate? So one of the key ingredients in this whole dish of payroll is leave and attendance. Okay. Now, if you take a step back, different sets of people can have different types of policies for attendance. So in a BPO, as you know, it's 24/7. If for other organizations in the service industry, you're generally working from morning to night, depending on the number of shifts that you have. So roster, which is your shifts, is very important for you to define in a system, so that the system already also is aware that Kevin is now part of the morning shift or afternoon shift or split shift and so on and so forth. Now, based on which the attendance needs to get marked. Now, attendance rules, like you can be late for only 15 minutes. And after that, if you are late, then the system will ask for an approval from your boss to accept your attendance, or you got to fill a half day if you are later by a certain period. And if you go early, then the half day applying there, and the extra hours that you put in terms of its computation for overtime, which is double the wages. So all this forms part of the pre-setup that you would do for any attendance. The leave policies are primarily common across employees. Okay, and they comply with the rules and regulations of the law. So whether you are so every state has its certain elements of earned leave, privilege, that is privilege leave, sick leave, and casual leave. Now, all those need to be entered into the system, and a person needs to be tagged to those policies. If you do not do that, then this whole system of payroll is not going to work. You are going to have errors. So therefore, the pre-work is very, very critical, and there should be no errors. So the first biggest input is payroll. Now is attendance. Now the attendance gets marked either on the system or through biometric or through app nowadays, which are available on phones with geotagging, geofencing, and all those elements. Whatever be the case, that is the most important piece. Now during the cutoff, which is 15th to the or 20th to the 30th of the month or 28th of the month, all employees are sent an email saying, please regularize any attendance that you've forgotten to mark, or you had outdoor duty, or whatever the case may be. So that's the time when anyone and everyone has to get onto the system and ensure that their attendance have been regularized or marked or everything in place. Because once that is payroll run is hit the final mode, you cannot then start having variables or inputs happening in between the payroll run. Whatever then has to be dealt with will be dealt next month. The other piece is around payments and deductions. So what exactly needs to be paid? The salary. What exactly needs to be paid? The bonus, or whatever else has been put in the offer letter. The second is deductions. As I started with my presentation saying that there are certain deductions that are applicable as per law, and then there are those deductions by virtue of your tax, PF, ESIC, labor welfare, and PT. So those are your deductions, your income tax, and finally, you will do the validation of all this before you do the payroll run. Now, there are some inputs. So these inputs are typically there from the system. So if you're using any system, you get these things automatically. But there are some inputs that are not automatic. And those inputs are related to performance bonuses or any other special allowance, special amounts to be given to a person. The overtime validation, okay, or any other special, say for example, I referred an employee to the organization and I'm eligible for a referral fee. Those are all special inputs that need to be sent to the HR or the payroll team to be included in that particular month. Okay, now again, those need to be approved. So these are the various things that need to go into a payroll process. Now, so while you are doing that, you are constantly checking to see that have I got all my inputs. Now, for those dealing with large workforces, and this has been my experience, when anybody is sending you emails during the payroll processing, please ensure that there is one email ID that they are sending it to and not multiple people, because there is one or two people who know what payroll processing is going on. The second, the subject matter whether it is pay or whether it is deduct or whether it is hold the salary because somebody has absconded, is very critical. They cannot have anything written in the subject line, and they expect the person in payroll to understand. So the more and more you standardize things like that, the easier it is for the payroll processing person to process payroll, especially when it is a large workforce spread across different locations. Okay, so that is one of the things that I found important to share. Now comes the actual payroll process. Now, when you're doing the actual payroll processing, if you're doing it through the system, and I will show you because I have some slides on the actual payroll processing through a system, you will pull out the data and the system automatically starts dragging in data from different, whether it's a biometric machine or it's an approval workflow and so on and so forth. It starts pulling out all information. If the expenses of my travel and stay, etc., or my local travel is being done on the system and is being approved, then the system also starts pulling out that information. So this is how it happens when you're using a system. So pretty easy, right? So those are things that are important to do when you're actually processing a payroll. Now, by and large, you do two processes. One, you do a payroll process, and then you send it out to the HODs to check and say, is this valid? Correct? Okay, I'm going in for the final run. Now, somebody will have a last minute input, or something happened that got approved by a client, and you want to pay to the employee, or so on and so forth. Those are things that come in after the first run is done. So you always do generally 2 runs. And in the first run, it is just for you to look that you got all the information, you checked it out, you got all the live employees, you are very clearly processing for those who have left, but you're not going to pay those out. So you have that set of category. And the third will be those people who just abandoned work without notice, for whom you processed, but you will have to stop it. So these are things that all payroll processing guys keep a look at when they're doing this process. At the same time, you do a check on the calculations. Okay, so if it is 28 days paid, 25 days paid, and so on and so forth, is the system accurately calculating as per that? Okay. Also, if leaves have been taken, has the system picked up the leaves from the leave workflow? So these are things that you will check when you're doing your first payroll run. Okay. So this is what I would say that you do to ensure that you are accurately paying. Now, I want to share with you here that payroll processing is a lot to do about what I call as a concept, and yesterday we talked about it, must be true. Now, what is this must be true concept? When you join an organization, you already know that you're joining for what role, what salary, but when you enter the organization, you're constantly as a human being checking that maine ye suna or maine ye dekha. So it is true. They said this and they did this, so it is true. They told me they're paying me 45,000 a month. They are paying me 45,000 a month, so it is true. So everybody is constantly psychologically checking must be true as a concept. So payroll is a very fundamental element in that must be true concept. Because if you pay correctly and you pay on time, whatever that date is, if you've decided to pay on 31st or 1st, or you decided to pay on the 3rd, those are sacrosanct. And you must do this month on month, because everybody is constantly checking psychologically must be true. And that builds a certain degree of sense of belonging into the organization. So while payroll has money, and money is properly accounted for in an accurate manner, but on the other side, payroll is all about the must be true, to ensure that employees feel comfortable working in the organization. So even if there's a deduction, they know that that deduction is done in good spirit and not arbitrarily without their knowledge. Even when overtime is paid, they know that I worked for 4 hours and I got for 4 hours. So you see, the accuracy of payroll transcends the elements of money into the elements of the emotional connect or the psychological connect employees have with an organization. Now, let's talk about a few things around the compliance. a labor standpoint. I'm not going to go too much into the income tax side of things. So when it comes to Provident Fund, PF, ESIC, bonus, gratuity. So there are a few things that you would need to comply with to ensure that your payroll run is not only paying the salary, but it is also complying with the rules and regulations. And the data that is there in the pay register, which is, by the way, one important register for labor, that register, along with your statutory deductions and payments, is a very critical element for the government department. Finally, it's also about the returns. So you got your challans that you would pay out every month, and there are timelines for those payouts, and one should not cross that because that attracts in penalty, interest, and damages. So therefore, ensure that you're paying on time. At the same time, you are also maintaining the challans and returns because those are auditable items, as you would rightly know. So these are some things that I would say are very important to have. Your PF UAN number, your ASIC identification number, your medical cards are very critical to have because one is the element of deduction, but when it comes to claims, and that will happen at some point in time, people shouldn't get stuck and say, oh my God, I deducted this money and I can't use it, or it is not there, it's not reflecting in my UAN, and so on and so forth. Remember, as I said, payroll is also about must be true. So if a person has to claim ESIC and cannot do it, you've damaged the must be true concept. And so therefore it is essential that these things are taken care of. So in Provident Fund, the UAN generation, linking it to Aadhaar. And so one of the critical elements here is ensuring that the name Kevin Dias as appearing in Aadhaar is the same that appears on PF form when it is going for UAN generation. So once that is done, the deductions which need to reflect on the payslip, very importantly, calculating your pensions, your EDLI, etc., very critical to happen, and also remit in those fashions. Okay, so the person doing this has to be aware of how these remittances are done in the challan. It is not rocket science, but it is important to do it accurately. Okay, and then filing of the returns, very, very important. You cannot just say that I have done my deductions, paid the challan, my work is over. No, the registers, the returns have to be ensured that are complied with in time. Okay, so I think this is very important because at the end of the day, when an employee claims PF, okay, so one is transfer PF. So a person leaves the organization, your first response is to transfer it from one company to another using the same UAN. It is not about withdrawal. Okay, and that is what your first action should be. But in the event of somebody taking a loan or withdrawing the PF, it is also important for us that these inputs that we have already done to the authorities are in correctness, so that when they come for any claim or they ask for a loan, it is smooth. ESIC, the Employee State Insurance Corporation, which is basically a very strong and powerful Mediclaim policy that is there, which the government provides. And it's actually very good. While we may carry different connotations or notions about ESIC, I also made that similar kind of notion. But when you really look at it, the scheme, the provisions, and what all it applies is far better in most respects to the Mediclaim policy that you probably hold privately. So generating the ESIC ID, ensuring that you have your Mediclaim cards, the photograph and the information of the family members, okay, that data is properly and effectively uploaded successfully on the portal, okay, and you're constantly ensuring that you're again doing your compliances. And in ESIC there is claims, and there will be claims, and so managing the claims by virtue of the deduction, so there's the contribution period and the benefit period, ensuring that you are compliant in these areas is very, very important. And finally, professional tax and labor welfare. I need not say much to you about professional tax. And labor welfare is there only twice a year. It's a nominal deduction that is there, but it is a significant compliance piece that needs to happen. So, so these are, I thought, very, very important for me to talk to you, especially when you're doing your payroll, because it's not only about a payroll processing, it's also about ensuring that you are completing the process with your compliance in it. Okay. Now, uh, these are a list of common statutory compliances companies need to follow. So we've spoken a lot about this, but I thought it's important for me to list it out for you so that you are aware. Uh, gratuity is one element that comes here with your actuals, and you're also making the provisions for the gratuity. Okay, so these are compliances that need to happen which are related to payroll. Okay, why is gratuity related to payroll? Because from the last drawn salary, the calculations. I'm going to pause for 1 second just so that you are able to see, and then we will move to the next slide. Okay, now we spoke about all this. I want to talk about 2 or 3 areas when it comes to payroll processing. We all know about payroll processing when a person joins. Okay, new joiners. We also know about exits. When a person exits the organization, you do the full and final. Now, in between, there are a few things that happen. One is the increment. So when salary revisions happen, the salary revision can happen in the fixed and also in the variable, or only in the fixed and not in the variable. In the fixed, there could be a change in salary in all allowances or only the basic, and the HRA, because HRA is a percentage of basic. So it is very important to ensure that the salary revision as a concept first is clearly defined. And then when the salary revision for each employee is computed and approved, it is entered correctly into the system with an effective date. Because if you have not put it from the effective date, the system will never know that from the 1st of this month, and primarily it is 1st of April. Some organizations have used Jan to December. There are some organizations that have used October to September, but primarily it is April to March. So if you've not written there 1st of April, system will not know. And sometimes these things get decided in June, for which you have to pay arrears from April onwards. Now, the salary revision comes with promotion, without promotion. And therefore, it is with promotion, then there could be a change in the eligibility of allowances. So let me give you an example. There was driver salary not eligible for a junior. Now the person got promoted to an assistant manager or manager. Now suddenly driver salary is applicable as a tax saving measure. So therefore, these are things that one has to be aware of and communicate that to the employee, that now you can avail of this tax saving measure, or a new allowance, or a new variable pay. The variable pay moved from 90-10 to 80-20. So therefore, now you need to ensure that that is updated. At the same time, the employee is told. And you have to also evaluate the impact to the net take home, because now you have more monies going into the variable. So these are considerations that I wanted to talk about. While it is not a pure play payroll processing, but it all impacts payroll processing. Okay, and so therefore these things are very important to check and ensure that it's done correctly. And if at all it is coinciding too close to payroll processing, my recommendation is do not impact payroll processing, because it's business as usual. And people do not like a wrong kind of payroll processing to happen, because there are a lot of loans and your house running that happens on a month-on-month basis. So it is okay to move it to the next month, where you have a little more time and elbow room for yourself to do it correctly. Don't rush it and probably have an error. Even one error or 10 errors is impactful to an organization, even if the organization is 500 employees. So that is one. Now, if you notice here down, there is hold salary. Some of you may have witnessed this, but I've witnessed this a lot in the different industries that I have worked with. At the end of the month, somewhere close to 27, 28th, there are some people or employees who stop reporting to work, or there is a threat that they may stop reporting to work. Now, firstly, a company needs to have a policy that allows for stop salary. And who can stop salary? It cannot be anybody. Junior can just send a mail to HR and say stop his salary. You cannot. That's not the way. So there are certain senior people in the organization who have the authority. Now, the reason why you do this is, as you know, it's money at the end of the day, and if it's paid out and it's wrongly paid out, its recovery is definitely not easy. So it is better to be forewarned. So therefore, you may process the salary, but you may put it on hold, reach out to the employee to find out whether this is genuinely something is wrong, not well, therefore this, or is absconded. And so therefore you may proceed in the next course of action based on what you have found. So this is also a part of the payroll processing, to be aware of who you've stopped salary, for what reason, and if it has to be released because it is genuine, immediately release the salary after the first payroll run has happened. Do not wait for too long. And if it has to be stopped because genuinely the person has abandoned work, then that is it, and put that then definitely in the full and final settlement. The other piece that I want to talk to you here is about reimbursements. Now, all of us are familiar with reimbursements of different natures. Many times I've noticed that employees do these reimbursements. Some of them do it on time, but a lot of them do it late. And also they do it too close to the payroll processing run. So, but everybody expects it to have got paid immediately in the particular payroll. So therefore, for all of you who are governing payroll and or assisting in governance of payroll, please ensure that these reimbursements can be something that you can process even outside of the payroll run. Ideally, yes, within the payroll run. But if you feel that this is something that is not correctly done, or it is better to have kept it and done a processing of only the reimbursements subsequently. Some organizations have used two forms of bank accounts, one to credit the salary and one to credit the reimbursements. Now that is an answer and question that you can raise with the organizations or with whoever you are consulting with. And as a chartered accountant, I mean, I leave that one to your intellect in terms of whether that is something that you recommend or not recommend. Okay, so now we are moving into the post payroll activities. Having understood that how a salary gets derived, how a structure gets derived, how it gets inputted, okay, how you run your payroll, the areas that you need to pay attention while you're running your payroll, there is a very, very important element called post payroll. So everybody is very happy, they got their salary, you've done your job, but it doesn't end. You have to ensure that the post activities are done correctly. So the payroll accounting, ensuring that the general ledger, etc., is properly updated, especially when you have projects and you have people who are allocated to projects in part or in full. How is that getting allocated to those P&Ls? Ensuring that data is properly given in an accurate manner. Now, as you also know, for a lot of client billing, it is based on the employee, the salary accounted for and paid. So therefore, the report that goes to operations based on different verticals and SBUs or departments or operational departments or clients that are you bifurcated in, that is a report that your system needs to provide. And if it isn't there, you customize it to ensure that you get that report, because you're going to need it every month. And so basis that, which is generally happens on the second day or the third day post payroll, this information needs to go to the account team, to each one of you from the HR guys, so that you are able to account for it correctly. The second element that happens is the audit, and we will talk about this audit in the slides to come. Now, it is important for the payroll team to first get a sign off from the head of department saying that this is the payroll going out for your department and getting paid. Now that is very important. It brings accuracy. It brings in accountability in the head of department, because now he knows that if I'm paying out 5 lakhs for my team, it's sitting in my P&L. And so tomorrow when accounts provides the P&L, he knows or she knows that this is what I signed it off on. And when you're signing off, you know amount of incentives have actually been achieved. So if it is less than 50%, you know there's a problem. If the overtime is too high, then you know something's wrong with the workforce management, or you're short staffed. But most critical, you are overworking a set of people, which will lead to burnout. And that will further reduce productivity, creating a further impact on the organization, which is not hidden, not seen, sometimes hidden for a period. So these are things that build in terms of the accountability. Then it's also about audit. So I've done the payroll. Can I actually go back and do random audits to check that have I done the payroll processing correctly? It is important to do it immediately, because even if there's an error, you can correct that error quickly. So say, for example, even if there was an extra payout that happened for a small value, you can reach out to that employee immediately before it turned into a problem. And also, as you know, this is nothing about the young workforce or anything like that, but primarily salary mostly is spent out in the first 10 days or 15 days. So therefore, if you have to recover, it is better to have done that before that salary is completely expensed out and the employee's account. And finally is the reporting. Multiple type of reportings to ensure that the organization is getting an understanding of that most critical cost known as employment cost or employee cost, which is sitting on the P&L, which tremendously impacts the profit of the organization. So the various reports in terms of departments, in terms of overtimes, incentives and bonuses and etc. Also saying that for a particular department, I have attrition, right? Now we hired new people. Now earlier I was paying 6 lakhs, but now because of the new hiring, I am now spending 6.25 lakhs. Now, so you are spending 25,000 more. Now that's another report that goes in, because somebody or the HOD approved hiring at values that are higher than what it was previously. Now, if it is justifiable, fine. But if it isn't justifiable, then there needs to be corrective action. So therefore, reporting is very critical. So it is important to do your proper accounting, the payout, and the whole reporting. Now, when you're doing the accounting, the other element is all about the PF, ESIC, P-tax, and your PF, your contributions, ensuring that it is actually there and credited into the correct accounts. Yes, I know that is actually something that is, you would say, हाँ वो तो होना ही था. But I have seen some payroll processing people who have not paid attention to checking whether it got actually credited. So when you deducted tax, but you did not credit it, or you did not do your TRES, and then suddenly you come to Form 16 and you realize that that process has not happened, or you deducted PF but not accounted for it and paid it in the correct account numbers, those lead to chaos at the end. And not to mention the penalties and fines that it will attract. So therefore, ensure that you are doing that correctly. Whatever you're withholding is correctly remedied in the correct places at the correct time. So very, very important for you to do that. Finally, let's talk about payroll audit before I move into the system. Now, it is very important for us to do audits. I don't need to tell this group, because this group is very, very familiar with audits. You're familiar with your statutory audits, and also audits that you would do proactively as an organization before these statutory audits fall into play. So it is very important for the HR team and even the finance team to jointly do an audit. Because many times I've seen one of the mistakes we make is payroll is HR team, it's not an organization. It is, it is left to one set of people. No, it is a collective element of how you do work. So therefore, the audit is better to have done. And if there's a healthy relationship, it is better to do a maker checker. So somebody else overseeing and evaluating the work done by the HR team or the payroll guy. So right form, is it the correct rate to pay? Is the correct pay given to the correct person? Even the bank accounts. Sometimes I have seen where credit has happened to the wrong person because it's a wrong bank account, and the person's money is gone to another bank account. Now, while you will do that recovery, and that's another process and pain that you would go through, please also understand that you have killed that must be true. Okay. And that's very critical. But at the same time, you've also done a breach of information because now somebody else knows somebody else's salary, which is something that you wanted to have kept confidential. So it is important for the audit to happen and check every piece of that whole journey to ensure that we're doing it correctly. This report, I don't think anybody should look at from a, you don't have to get scared of this report, because in my mind, bad news is good news. So if there are errors and it highlights in an audit, it is good because you know what to fix. If you sweep it under the carpet, it will come out at the end of the year, and that may be very impactful from both from a money point of view, a reputation point of view, and you do not want that to happen. So bad news is good news. It's better to have an audit that is done and bring out everything so that you are able to correct it. It's also, it's not about finger pointing. It's about accuracy, consistency, and compliance. So that is where I would place the audit. Okay, and finally, it's also about demonstrating financial controls. It's also ensuring that you have a good process in place to ensure that there are controls and measures and risk management. Now, these are things that a lot of progressive organizations, and each one of you are doing a fantastic job in guiding organizations on that journey. And so audit very critically. So these are the various things that I put down in the second half of that slide, as you can see, on what all you would kind of check. I'm going to pause for 1 second so that you're able to read that, and then I will move to my next slide. Now, one of the areas that I want to talk about here is the full and final settlement. Now, the full and final settlement is not real, is a part of the payroll processing, because one of the inputs that come to the full and final is the payroll process itself. So while payroll processing is done, or full and final processing is done at the end, it is important to note that the input to that is the payroll, right? So the last working day, the correct calculations, and ensuring that any payments, deductions, if there's somebody had the company property with a laptop or phone, etc., and that was damaged, for which there was a need to recover money, or there was a breach of a particular contract for which there was a consideration that was legally signed off, then those are things that you would look at into the full and final settlement. Again, full and final settlement is something that is just like payroll. It is a must be true. I would recommend that each one of us come with a point of view that we should not hold back any legal dues of any employee just because the person was a good leaver or a bad leaver. You may take recourse to actions on how to pay and what to pay and how much to pay and how much to deduct and how much penalty to levy. But it is important for you to ensure that you are making the payment to dues that are payable. And if dues are recoverable, then there is a process in place to recover the dues, which could be the company's letters or taking recourse to legal to ensure that you are recovering those dues from an employee. So I think the full and final calculation, and now, of course, in the new labor codes, it is important for you to pay this in a certain time frame. Whether that time frame is doable or not is a discussion for another day. But there are time frames within which you need to pay the full and final settlement. And if the full final settlement is a person who's completed 5 years, it also includes the gratuity. So please ensure that your organizations that you're guiding or organizations that you're working with have done the actual and have ensured that the monies for gratuity are kept aside either in the books or it's kept aside by virtue of a policy taken for gratuity. So these get paid out, and the bonuses, of course, get paid out. Now, the statutory bonus is paid out definitely, but performance bonus obviously is paid out based on the performance of that person prorated for that particular period. So this is how it is. And also in terms of long-term bonuses or ESOPs, there are rules and guidances that are there in the offer document, which say that if you have not been there on the rolls active till a particular period, some of that is not due. So while you're doing those calculations, please refer to those documents that provide you a guidance on whether it is due to be paid or not to be paid. And if it is due to be paid, is it in full or is it in part? So these are some things that I would leave with you in terms of the payroll process. Now, what I would like to do in the next few minutes is walk you through one technology called DIY HR and see how payroll processing happens actually on a system. While payroll processing can be done by an Excel or on a system, I would always recommend a system, whether it is this or any other, because it gives the consistency, it gives you the accuracy, it also enables you to demonstrate over a period of time your governance. So it also brings in conformance. Okay, so therefore, when I say conformance, when there's Excel, you can always go back and change a value, etc., in course of time. But when you use a system, those elements are limited, and so therefore you have to follow a protocol, and that builds discipline into an organization. So typically, you would always have, so all systems come in with a login. It is important. I'll move from here to Emilia straight. Now, it is very important for you to look at any system with the masters. Okay. So the first master that you need to ensure that happens is the company setup. So the company setup in terms of is very critical. Now, why is that critical? And more so for this group is because where would you like the cost center to be managed and recorded is very, very important to ensure that your finance system, whether you're using Tally or any other system, coincides with the HR system. So at what level you are accounting for in terms of the cost center and the profit center is important for you to derive even in the company setup here. Also, where would you like to see the approvals and where would you like to see the roll up that happens in the organization? So starting from the holding company to the various companies to the SBUs, okay, and strategic business units by location or by line of business, etc., is something that you may want to bifurcate. Okay, so again, if those entities are by themselves and what are their your tax numbers and so on and so forth need to get registered. So this is the first company setup, very critical to me. The second important setup is the earning heads. As we spoke about earlier, and I showed you the salary structure, it is important for you to draw out and define how a salary structure is going to be for your organization or the ones that you're consulting. So as you can see here, a screen of basic, your HRA and various other allowances that allows you to define it, saying that is it tax exempt or not tax exempt, okay, the frequency of its payout, is it a fixed value, is it a percentage value, is it a variable value, okay. So these are things that need to be there. Is it active for this particular grade and level or not part of this grade or level? So these are things that you would like to define, whether it is part of the pay slip or not. Okay. So these are some things that you would like to define right at the start. So take time when you're doing this to please define these things accurately. And they also have to be attached. Once defined, please look at it that these need to be attached to the sets of employees that these are going to be applicable to. So if you have created multiple structures, which is not wrong, ensure that they are attached correctly to those sets of employees for which it is applicable. Okay. Then comes your deductions. Okay. So whatever deductions, these are some random ones that we put. Food coupons is one area there, and things like that, as you are also very aware of. So various deductions that are going to be applicable and their heads. So I think that is something that you need to define. The grade structure. Remember we talked about that how a salary is derived by grades, levels, complexity, responsibility, and so on and so forth. So it's also important for you to do that. Also the location. So maybe if you are saying tier 1 city, and if that tier 1 city has 50% of the basic is HRA and it's 40% for tier 2, you get to define that in when you're doing the grade structuring over here. And the salary components, both these things have to match so that you have a smooth process. So having the grade and salary structure, the PF, the various effective dates. Now, why is this important? You may want to change your structure in between of the year, or maybe at April when you gave the increment, you want to bring in a new allowance or a new bonus. Effective date, very critical. because without that, the system is dumb. Any system is dumb. It only knows when you input and tell it that this is what it is going to be applicable from. Also, it is important from a tax point of view. So very important for you to define this. Once you've defined this, here is the screen of the shifts. Now, as I mentioned, your roster and your shifts need to be defined onto a system. So the system benchmarks against the actual attendance. All right. While you may accept the actual attendance, nothing wrong with that. But it is important for the organization to know that Kevin was supposed to come at 9 o'clock, but comes every day at 10 o'clock. So do I need to deduct? Do I need to reprimand? Do I need to let it be? Or should I change his shift to 10 rather than keeping it at 9? So I think it's important. It's very important for you to draw up these. In organizations that are 24/7, you could have multiple shift options, which runs in hundreds because there are overlapping shifts and things like that. All that needs to be defined over here, including your weekly offs. Now, they could be rotating weekly offs, or it could be the Saturday, Sunday, as it is generally applied. Then comes the employee master. I don't need to tell you much about this, but it's important for you to, and here I think I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. One is the probation, the notice period, very critical. Because if somebody is getting confirmed in 3 months or 6 months, which we talked about yesterday, the system needs, or you need to know, is there an increment on or change in salary on confirmation? Or is there a bonus payout that is there on a retention basis that is due to be paid on confirmation? All these things are important. So how would you know if you are dealing with hundreds of people? So that's here is where you start defining those things. So you are able to see it and get reminded that there is something that you need to do. So updating the system on the employee master is very critical, not only for the information, but here, please note, accuracy of name, telephone number, account number, UAN number, etc., is of paramount criticality. There is no tolerance to having an error in this area. So please ensure that there are checks and balances to ensuring that this particular piece is well done and there is no error. There are softwares today that are there that actually read the documents and automatically input the information into an HRMS system. So attendance policies, I'm going to move a little more quickly because leave more time for you to ask me questions. So the attendance master is there where you define late, early, okay? There are also the leave balances. When will it get credited? So normally companies credit leave because it's earned leave every month on it after being earned. So there is that, or you do it at the end of the year as per what the law has said, but you can credit it every month. So that credit, and if I credit, then can it be used? And if it is to be used, how is it to be applied for? All these things need to be put onto the system. And if it is to be applied for, who approves? Within how many days? And if it is not approved, is it auto-approved? Or it is auto-rejected? Very important things for a payroll processing. Because if there's a leave sitting in the system will pick it up. And it may pay that person. Okay, but if it is not approved, it is well possibly that it may be a leave without pay. So these elements are very critical for you to define in a positive manner. My only guiding principle here is do not define a policy because of the fear of deviation. Please understand that those who deviate are only 8 at max 10% of the population. You are not defining a policy for 8 or 10%. You are defining a policy for 90%. So please go with that positive attitude when you are defining policies for an organization. And one thing there, whether attendance or leave, right from the CEO down to the last person, everybody has to apply and everybody has to conform. And that builds culture and values in an organization. It is not because I'm the CEO or I'm the vice president, so I'm exempt from applying or marking my attendance, etc. It is a culture, it is a discipline that you need to ensure that happens across the organization. The salary master, we spoke about this. Okay, so you put in the salary master. These are your checking for, now this is the payroll processing, where you're checking for your actual attendance and paid days, okay? You're checking for transactions, you got your report, which is your attendance register and things like that. So the system automatically starts bringing in these reports for you to ensure that what is the attendance, what are paid days and things like that. And this is where you compute paid days, okay, for each individual, for a particular SBU, for a particular company, for an entire group, etc., etc. All that can be done over here. You can also do payroll processing, and maybe that's a subject for another day, for multiple geographies, for those organizations that are there not only in India but outside of India. You can do that even for the organizations that have these multiple geographies. Variable. These are uploads. As I told you, these are special earnings that are going to come, whether it's a bonus or it's a deduction or areas and whatever have you. These are uploaded. Now it has to be clearly known that the upload has to happen in the format strictly with correct inputs of data. So you cannot give Kevin an earning and put, say, Hemant's employee code. Okay, that's not going to happen, and that's where the system will have a wrong calculation. So please ensure that those accuracy elements are maintained. Uploading variable disk, uploading areas, okay. And then comes the salary generation. Okay, so you're able to generate the salary for a period, as you can see, for the month of June, for the department, etc., location, all that, and you say generate payroll. So this is how you would run that. So now once you have that entire thing drawn up, you got the net pay. This is a report, of course. At the back end of this is the actual calculation, which is also another report which you can download in Excel, etc. All systems have this. And now you can say okay to pay or okay to display. Okay, so this is what it is. As you can see, there are around 586 records here. Your TDS calculations. Okay, so most systems already have that, and with experts like you, this can be constantly reviewed, modified, keeping in mind the changes that are happening. So that is one thing that you do. And finally, the stop salary that we talked about, where you would want to hold back a salary. So there is a processing of salary you must do. Okay, whether you pay it and credit it into the bank account is another action altogether. So you're processing the salary, you're just stopping the pay to the account. Okay, because that person has worked, you will bill the client. Okay, you will credit PF, ESIC. Okay, but it's just that you're not paying that salary out to that individual. So your compliances, etc., need to happen. So you are processing. Okay, so finally you will lock the salary, because once you lock the salary, it is not, like I said earlier, it's not like an Excel sheet that you can keep going back and change. This is auditable item, and so therefore you lock the salary, and there's a security stamp of who is that person's login that has gone and locked the salary. So once that happens, the system now has locked that salary. You cannot go back and change it. You can, but that would need a set of approvals, and that set of approvals again is recorded by the system, saying that Kevin overrode this, or Hemant processed it, Kevin overrode it, and for what reason did Kevin override it. So these are things that are built in to the system. So I'm going to stop here and open to any questions that you may have for me in terms of payroll processing or system, or whatever the case may be.
So we have some questions in the chat box, if you can see them.
Yep. Please advise the legality of a financial liability clause in the appointment contract. In case employee leaves the organization before specific period, can employee be forced to be compensate the organization this clause? Okay, now a lot of organizations have, yes, you can have a contract with an employee so you have to understand what is it that you're seeking, okay, as an action. So Kevin was supposed to work for you for 2 years. Now, firstly, remember that I have right to employment. I can work anywhere with any organization because I'm a citizen. Now, you cannot stop me from going anywhere. But so what are you really looking at is one, Kevin being there. Second, if Kevin wasn't there, there is some damage because you have put Kevin through either a training or you've given him some inputs or you have given him something that you have spent on for which you are making good. So generally, the clauses here are deterrents to ensure that Kevin stays into the organization. But in the event that happens, you are only able to enforce to the extent of you bringing it where there is an input you had done, an expense you have done, and now you're recovering that. So you sent Kevin to America to learn a particular technology and come back, and now Kevin has to do that in the system. And I left. So you're claiming that from me. So those things are tenable. If possible, please guide us on EPF, how companies should deposit the deducted in EPFO. Secondly, points to remember and what mistakes often happens and leads to legal problems. Now, I'll take the second one first. Okay. I'm very happy that you asked this question because in the normal smooth running of things, no problem. So what are the challenges that happen? Some of the challenges is where the name, right? I'll start with this. Where the name on the Aadhaar and the name on the PF UAN is not the same. Okay. And that creates the first problem. So the UAN number is not generated or it doesn't come and that takes a delay. So now that money has to get remitted somewhere and things like that. So therefore the first step is always ensure that the name is the same so that you are able to correct it in the UAN, correct UAN. If the person already has a UAN number, fantastic. Things need to get deposited within the specific timeline. Now, I have seen organizations late by 2 days, late by 3 days, Now, plus you must know that that is not going unnoticed. So the authorities are going to calculate the fine and are going to post it on the online portal for you to check. And if you've forgotten to check, you got interest in damages. So you got to be careful that when you are not doing this, these are things that impact an organization. Now you may say just one day, or there is now if there's an error in the calculation, okay, you forgot to put the EDLI in the correct area, you did not deduct it on the correct set of allowances that are now prescribed and are now made very clear in the new labor code. Now that is where you come up with a new problem that you have wrongly deducted or are not deducted accurately. Now you can correct it and remit it because if you have made an error and you corrected it and remitted it, that is good. But if you have made an error and you've not bothered to rectify it, that is not good. So please ensure that even if you made an error, it is important for you to correct it and remit that monies into the account. Please guide us on the a company should deposit deducted in EPFO. I think that point I will take later, okay, because it's pretty straightforward. I would like to answer the questions that are a little more because you can read the act and it's pretty straightforward there. For deciding CTC, what kind of perquisites can be given to employees like newspaper, etc.? Yes, so books and periodicals, normally you say newspaper, but the terminology used is books and periodicals. Now, why you use that is because you want a person at a particular level to refer, read, and upgrade themselves. So it is not randomly just done. It is because the role requires somebody to have upgraded themselves, read the Harvard Business Review, or read reports of that particular industry and the happenings and so on. So books and periodicals is something that you can use. Now, how do you decide some of this? To some extent, we discussed it yesterday and today. So, for example, if at a particular level of manager and above, I come to work and I'm generally would be able to afford and use a vehicle. So therefore, having a vehicle allowance, whether it's a car allowance, a driver, or a fuel, becomes something that would be realistic to have applied to that set of person. If I have a worker and there's a staff and I've given them a set of uniforms, like people working in retail stores or workmen, etc., or delivery people, etc., you can give a washing allowance or a uniform maintenance allowance. So you see, it is to be done in relevance to the role and it has to make sense. Just randomly giving allowances and nomenclatures, I would avoid. So this is how we would go about defining. Also, the values that you put there need to make some sense. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So this is how I would break up the allowance when I am giving it to to various people. Now, there's a question here that says, these days I observe the employees are not satisfied with HR. Okay. They are unhappy with the managers or seniors, and even after reporting to HR, does nothing. See, this is I'll answer this in two parts. First, yesterday we spoke about culture. This is directly impacting the culture of the organization. If you have an HR team and the HR team is supposed to be the impartial body that somebody goes to in any form of grievance or challenge or anything they would like to say, because they trust that they can go to somebody and they know there's no retaliation, etc. But you have not empowered that particular department with the ability to effect its job, then you have destroyed the culture of the organization by simply creating a fabric like this. And I have seen in my experience, there was an organization that kept going to employees every quarter to get feedback. Okay. So the HR guy went, met with a set of people and got feedback. Now, when it came to actions, the organization did not do too much and never also went back to the employee to saying, I did not do it because of these reasons, or I did it because of this. After the second quarter, you would not believe that the employee actually went back to the HR guy and said, please do not come and ask us because you are not going to do anything. Now, it is not the HR guy's fault. It is the organization's fault for creating a culture where you asked and you did not bother to walk the road. Number one. The second reason why the HR is not respected is because HR delivery. Just like operations has a service level agreement, just like finance also has a certain sets of things that are done at a particular way because of governing principles, accounting principles, and laws. Similarly, like that, HR delivery has to have SLAs. If we have committed that we will do things in a particular manner, it has to be benchmarked and also done. Many times it doesn't happen, as a result of which the respect of the HR team is impacted. If payroll is not accurate, if the employee is not getting his employment letter on time, if employee codes are delayed, if there's a increment that's delayed, whatever is delayed or not happening consistently and effectively. So if you noticed in my conversation, I've always used the word consistently and effectively. Okay, efficiently, sorry. So if it is not done in that fashion, HR or any department for that matter is not respected. So this is a top-down approach. It needs to be dealt with from a top-down approach. It is not an HR department. It is the company that needs to be looking at this. I'm also going to, okay. When a bachelor joins, generally opts the name of the father or mother in PF, but after marriage changes it to wife. In case of death of the male employee, but employee generally fails to make this fact aware to such bachelor's employees at time of filing. Okay. So you're saying that if I've understood, Hemanji, if I've understood from this, what we are trying to say is that only after marriage you get the wife in it, obviously. But before that, there is the father and mother, and the probability that they succeed the person in terms of lifespan is limited. And so therefore, in the event of any one of their death or the bachelor's death, I'm saying that I'm still trying to understand the question. Would you like to throw some light?
So nomination in the name of father or mother But after marriage, despite no change in the original nomination, wife automatically overtakes the right. Is it possible, sir?
No, it is the nominee that has been done in the form. Okay, the wife does not supersede. Now, especially during this COVID period, let me give you these examples. I have seen number of cases where the male has not updated the nomination form, and as a result of which the dependent wife and children have not got the amount. Okay, and that has gone into some suspense, and you and I can only understand and dream of what happened to that suspense account. But it is purely based on what has been written in the nomination form. Okay, because Kevin is writing there that my money goes to a particular person. So it maybe there is the civil code, and also there's the most of the religions have their own succession, but if I've already mentioned it there, it goes there.
So in the end, the question is mentioned, but the employer generally fails to make this fact aware to such bachelor employee at the time of filing the EPF nomination form. Is it the duty of the employer, sir, to?
So normally what has happened, proactive HR teams have created in part of the induction a two-liner or a three-liner highlighting this point to the employee. But it is the onus of the employee. Okay. But the HR team in the induction has mentioned there that please fill the nomination and also note that it is what your nomination is the person who gets the money. So the person is fully aware that now I have put this, and that is going to happen. Now, what I have realized is that even after marriage, some of the guys forget to put and change it to wife. Now, I cannot go and tell that guy, "Arey, you got married, now put it to your wife." It is not correct of the HR department and the employer to say that. So again, it is left on to the employee to take that own decision. Many times companies don't pay pro rata performance bonuses. Yes, that is wrong. Okay. And again, it is very important, as we spoke yesterday, in terms of the employment contract. If you realize we spoke about writing only those things that are contractually liable to be paid to an employee. And if it says performance bonus, the policy has to define how that is going to get paid out in terms of good lever, bad lever, good performance, bad performance, half, full, or quarter. Okay. So the performance bonus policy needs to be the guiding document to define how it gets paid. If that is there and it is clearly outlined that I'm eligible for a pro rata, so I left the year in 6 months, but I'm asking for my performance bonus. Now, the organization can take time because those goals are generally annual goals. For example, I will pay you the performance bonus if the company achieves a target of 5 crores or 10 crores or whatever. Now that number is only due understood post the audits, the audit at the end of the year, where you know that did I actually achieve it. So organizations can take that time to ascertain whether I've really achieved the benchmark. So therefore I need to pay and then pay, but not paying in toto is wrong. If the policy has said that you're eligible. Now, if the policy clearly says that for you to get the performance bonus, you have to be in the system, and there are some that say that you should not be on notice period also, then that is the terms and conditions that you've signed on. And so if they don't pay, they are within the purview of that policy.
There's another question during COVID.
I wanted to withdraw my PF, but since my mobile number was not matching as per Aadhaar, I could not get my money from the PF. They asked me to submit a declaration. I was stuck for almost a year. Then I got it. Is there any other way out? If not, kindly advise people to keep their mobile numbers updated. Absolutely. I think it is very critical to do that. And sir, if I could take this with you offline, but I think for all on this call, trust me, the COVID has opened the eyes to these points in very bright form. First, nominations were missing. Secondly, people did not know where the nomination forms are in the house or wherever it is. there was no list of these are the insurance policies, etc. that I have. These are the account numbers that are there where I have joint accounts and where there are only single name but no nominees. Okay. There is also an element of no will. Okay. And it is very, very critical. The COVID has not only, this is a small point that you brought about in terms of mobile numbers. I have seen people suffering because they have lost a very critical person in the family, but they don't even know where to look for anything. The passwords or the code numbers or the account numbers were in the mobile phone, and the mobile phone is locked and it is not written anywhere else. So you can imagine the kind of pain and suffering they had gone through post that. I would recommend for everybody here, first thing, please make a list and share it with your beloved wife or husband. Keep it somewhere so that somebody has access to it. Put all your nominations in place and please make a will. Okay, it is very important for you to do those things so that there is no ambiguity in the event of an eventuality. What should we take care of when we process payroll for foreign entities? How to ensure that all deductions? Yeah, so now when you're making payroll for foreign entities, we very briefly touched upon it. There is also payroll for international workers who are working in your country right now here. And of course, you've done the FRRO nominations, etc. So one is that. The other element is payroll of foreign countries. Now, each country has their own set of deductions and payables. Now, but by and large, you should know from my experience that by and large, most countries conform to some basic principles. Most countries have social savings, that is like your PF. Most countries have an ESIC, and most countries have various tax deductible kind of components that are very local. Some are complicated, but some are very simple. If an expat is working, of course, the ability to save tax is very limited. But these things you need to know. Please take advice from a firm, etc., wherever you are doing the payroll. See, in these countries, it is very critical to ensure that if you are said that you are going to pay on 28th, you pay on 28th, not 27, not 29. In India, you have a little leeway, but in some of those countries, you are non-compliant. At the same time, if there are deductions given by virtue of the income tax, etc., and if you have not done it in an accurate manner, there is huge amount of penalty. So I would recommend that first take advice on the structure firstly itself, okay, and then in terms of the deductions to pay. There are softwares that also are able to deal with, if you're an organization that has multiple locations, there are softwares also that are enabling you to have a software to deal with this. So I do understand I've answered this question in a little bit of generality, but if the individual has any specifics, I can take that offline, not a problem.
Overtime should be double of basic or gross salary.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I beg your pardon?
So that's the last question
No,
regarding overtime.
Hmm.
Should it be double of basic salary or gross salary? Is there a norm for this?
Yeah, so I think I would just refer to the new labor codes, but it is, yes, it's double the wages. Okay. And I would refer you to look at the labor codes as of now. What I will do on this call, Hemant, I do not want to delve into the labor codes right now.
Perfect.
But I will send you this answer on the to either one of you, and you can respond to this gentleman or lady.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin, sir. Once again, you have showed that you can explain the complex intricacies of the subject in a very simple and vivid manner. I would say you are an expert in hand-holding a new person through a complex and intricate topic than the seminar which we are discussing yesterday and again today. You were awesome with your flow of words, the smooth way in which you carried through the session. In spite of your busy schedule, thank you, sir. On behalf of our institute, I extend my gratitude to you.
Thank you so
And
much.
I
Sorry.
would also like to express my gratitude to all the esteemed delegates of the webinar for their presence. And all of us are looking forward to once again hear Kevin sir on day 3 of the webinar on human resource management and labor laws tomorrow.
Right. So thank you. And I'm actually very humbled actually to have been able to talk to such experienced and learned people as yourselves and talk about topics that I'm sure you have more knowledge than me. So thank you for having me. And I'm really excited about the next 2 days. So as we talk about HR audits and a few things around that and how to build a great place to work, which is tomorrow. And day after that, we are talking about training and learning and things like that. And actually, I'm very excited because each one of you have decided to expose yourselves to these topics, which is truly forward looking. And that is, and I salute each one of you for having this forward looking approach to yourselves. And God bless and thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure and privilege, sir. Thank you so much. So with this, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.